So now it's time to start putting a timeline together, and after giving it some thought, I decided that the best place to start would be to put down the games that I'm most sure of first. If you remember from the first video, these games will be color-coded black on the scale. The first two that will be dealt with are Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. Majora's Mask is certainly one of the most obvious direct sequels in the Zelda universe to date. The game starts with Link on Epona, dressed and appearing exactly as he did at the end of Ocarina of Time, looking for Navi, his fairy from the Ocarina of Time. On his journey, he's waylaid by the Skull Kid, who transforms him into a Dooku Kid and also transports him to Termina. Termina proves to be an alternate version of Hyrule, where four giants, instead of three goddesses, created the world. Link soon learns the Skull Kid is trying to destroy this world by colliding it with the moon, and Link only has a set amount of time in which to save it. As this is not going to be enough time, more time-traveling shenanigans ensue. Link also discovers masks along the way that give him new transformations and abilities. Important things of note are that Ganon is mentioned nowhere in this game, the Master Sword doesn't make an appearance, and nor does Zelda. As this game contains obvious references, however, to Ocarina of Time in its opening, as well as almost certainly being the exact same Link, it's going to be placed directly after that game, occurring within a period of no more than 2 years, most likely even sooner than that. As this is set in an alternate reality, however, which brings the total number of timelines up to 3 by the way, it will be displayed a little bit differently on the timeline to represent this. At the end of the game, it appears that Link, however, has been sent back to the normal Young Link timeline. So we're going to connect the end of that to that. Wind Waker created waves when it was first shown for its cel-shaded art design, which ran counter to the more gritty designs that were popular at the time. Despite this, it proved to be a huge game that more than lived up to its previous entries in the series. We are introduced to a new hero who is celebrating his birthday when a giant bird kidnaps his sister. While having one of the more odd opening situations in the series, he is quickly caught up in a sprawling epic against that most sinister of foes, Ganon. Ganon is once again trying to find the rest of the Triforce, and is scooping up every young girl he can get his hands on, trying to find the descendant of Zelda. In the beginning of the game, we learn that the events of Ocarina of Time have turned to legend, and that while Ganon was defeated, he did eventually return. The goddesses, seeing that there was no one who would stop him, chose to go all Noah on his ass and sunk the entire world beneath a great ocean to prevent him from taking it over. This plan, while odd, appears to have worked. So where to place it on the timeline? It seems at first glance that it could be placed on either side of the timeline. After all, while the people in the Young Link timeline didn't actually live through the events, Link presumably told Zelda of what happened to them. This seems flimsy, though, and fortunately can be all but thrown out when Link finally gets the Master Sword. A close look at the windows in the Temple of Time shows that there is a representation in stained glass of each of the sages that sealed away Ganon. This is extremely unlikely from just hearing a story from a child of what happened, and is blatantly impossible to have happened in the Young Link timeline, as there is no way that Rauru, still behind the seal, could have posed for an artist. Also, some of the sages that were children at this time are depicted as adults. This puts the game in the Adult Link timeline, occurring some hundreds of years after Ocarina of Time. Now, at the end of this game, Ganon is once again defeated. In this case, he has the Master Sword skewered through his head, and then he turns to stone. Then the entire area around him goes underwater. So, he's not going to be a factor for a while. Pretty safe to say. Anyone who has tried to make this timeline realizes it's hard, and just to point out how hard, I want to point out one of the glaring problems that's already in this timeline with only 3 games in it. Now you might wonder what that could possibly be. Well, this is the problem. This green-wearing dandy is Tingle, and he's in both games. He's not alluded to or spoken of, he's physically in both games. He's also just as annoying as this picture suggests that he is. Tingle thinks he's a fairy, and often assists Links with maps and directions. Being in both games, it's really hard just to explain away. Majora's Mask doesn't even take place in the same world as Wind Waker, even if you throw out the split in the timeline. Now fortunately, numerous characters from Ocarina are also in Majora's Mask, So it's possible that there was an alternate version of Tingle existing in Hyrule at the time of Majora's Mask, and we just never really saw him in Ocarina of Time. Now, if that is the case, then certainly when the timeline split, we got two Tingles, one in each timeline. But for Tingle to be in Wind Waker, he would have to be hundreds of years old, and he's never shown as anything but a fruitcake who is good with maps. The only good thing about this is because he must be hundreds of years old or possess some sort of portal technology, because you can't convince me that this could have happened twice no matter how much time passed. Fortunately, his presence doesn't affect the timeline then. He's just one of those annoying Zelda mysteries that dwells on one's back of one's mind when you're trying to put something like this together. In the next video, our timeline will go handheld.